There's no doubt about it, we are in for some very worrying times in the UK. We may well be facing a recession, and I'm very sorry to say that I think that I was right in respect of Rachel Reeves' ludicrous budget, along with the rest of the government's overly ambitious plans and their goals to grow the economy. That doesn't really seem to be the case. But before we get into that, if you are new to me, I'm Daniel Shensmith, a barrister of England and Wales. I'd be really grateful if you subscribe down below. It's free, it takes a second, and that helps me grow the channel. I don't have a big team behind me, it's just me. There's no big media company behind these walls, it is just me. And I depend on you to help grow my channel. So what are we talking about here? Well, the UK has shrunken its economy for the second month in a row. And if it continues doing that, we will enter a recession. And that's obviously bad for everybody. So very broadly speaking, the GDP, or gross domestic product, is one of the main measures of the growth of an economy. Growth is good and shrinking is bad. It's generally accepted that a growth rate of 2 to 3% is considered normal for a developed economy. This will typically be higher for an economy that is still developing. But if the growth rate is below 2% or at worst negative, the economy is shrinking and possibly entering a recession. Obviously that is bad, it means standards of living will go down and we want to avoid that. Oddly enough, if an economy grows too rapidly, that could be bad as well because it could lead to bubble and burst scenarios, and so markets could be overinflated with a high risk of a crash. But obviously we do want a growth in the economy to gradually improve the standard of living. Now, what's going on here is the economy has shrunk for the second month in a row, causing major concerns, despite all of the promises of the growth and the reset and everything else by this new government. Now, just to be clear, they've only had a short while in government, so this is not to be overly harsh, you understand, but it's certainly not a good sign. So what's going on here is the Office for National Statistics has estimated that the GDP has fallen by 0.1% in October. And that follows a fall of 0.1% in September. So 2 consecutive months of shrinkage is certainly not a good thing. So here I'm going to play you just a snippet, I promise, of Rachel Reeves' reaction to this. And I'm not going to be too harsh, but I do think it is a teensy-weensy bit disingenuous. Let me play it to you first.
The numbers on GDP are disappointing, but it's not possible to turn around more than a decade of poor economic growth and stagnant living standards in just a few months.
Now, to be fair, it would be unrealistic to expect a magical turnaround in a few weeks or a couple of months, and it has sort of been a bit of a stagnant economy for over the last 10 or 15 years or so, notwithstanding COVID, which I'll come back to in a moment. But it doesn't really give the full picture. So the fuller picture would be really to look at the last 10 years, or going back many decades. We can look at the Office for National Statistics here, looking at the GDP growth, and I can give you a few pointers as to what happened, and we can all make an assessment. So let's take a quick look at what happened. I won't bore you with every little detail, but I do find this sort of stuff interesting when I look at it. So let's say if we work backwards and we look at 2023, a growth of 0.3%. Now, this could be for a number of reasons. It could be from high inflation. It could still be from recovery from the pandemic and so on. If we go back to 2021, this was a growth of 8.6%. Now, you remember when I said a developing economy would have a higher growth rate? This is most likely a result of the bounce back, obviously, from COVID, and so that would sort of imitate in many ways a developing economy, because we're coming out of a lockdown, a bounce back in the economy, so a growth rate of 8.6% was probably expected. This is following a shrinkage of 10.3% in 2020, obviously because of the COVID-19 lockdown. Then we can look at 2009, the economy shrank by 4.6%. That was obviously around the time of the global financial crisis and the collapse of major financial institutions. Then we can look at 1991. The economy shrank by 1.4%. This was obviously the end of the 80s boom and a combination of high interest rates, falling house prices, declining consumer confidence, and the early 1990s recession. Going back to 1980, obviously we had Margaret Thatcher's reforms and policies that were aimed at reducing inflation but led to higher interest rates and a sharp decline again in industrial output. And so we could go on and look at all of these things and look at patterns, but if we ignore to some degree the massive dip caused by the pandemic and the bounce back which you often see in markets anyway in 2021 with 8.6 growth, You can see really going back here, we've had a growth rate of 1.6, 1.4, 2.7, 1.9, 2.2. This is going back now to 2014, a growth of 3.2%. This is all around about the accepted rate, but not particularly fantastic. So over 2% in a few cases in some years, and 3.2% in 2014. So not particularly fantastic, but not overly drastic either. Obviously, taking aside for the out of the ordinary pandemic and the bounce back in the following year. So overall, you could draw some averages and estimates there and say it wasn't overly fantastic, but it was not absolutely devastating either. So just not fantastic, really, is probably the best way of putting it. But here we are now with the second month of decline, and the reports still say that businesses and manufacturing industries are cautious, and there's been reportedly the sharpest drop in activity in October, together with the services sector, which is the bulk of the UK economy, stalled with zero growth. So overall, businesses are still concerned, and this is a serious concern because of the second month of shrinkage in a row, and businesses just don't seem to have that confidence. Personally, I think the budget needs to be rethought, and it does need to be changed because I can't see this changing for the positive anytime soon. Now, there is another story I'd like to talk about in just a moment, because there's been a number of organizations now accused of job adverts that are discriminatory, in that they are only open to applicants who are of Black, Asian, or ethnic minority backgrounds. More about that in just a moment. On another note, you'll know that I love to share great products and services with you, and you'll probably know with the Black Belt in the Black Belt Barrister that I'm a bit of a fitness and health fanatic. So I'm really pleased to introduce you to a company called Wholly that produces iced teas, energy drinks and hydration drinks, but not full of rubbish that some other drinks may be, mentioning no names. But these are absolutely fantastic. And many of you know that I stopped drinking alcohol completely about 1.5 years ago now, and I've never felt better. But because I stopped drinking alcohol and I didn't have any recreational drink, I was always looking for something else. So these Wholly drinks have really filled that space for me. And in fact, this is a really special edition because they've got some new Christmas flavors, limited edition. So this is baked apple, this is winter punch, and this one is Frosty Fox. So this one's Frosty Fox. I'm going to give this a go. This is an energy drink in refreshing candy flavor. Let's give this one a go. The smell is really fruity, really quite refreshing, like almost like a mint. Let's give it a go. Wow. Really quite uplifting, quite fresh. Hard to describe. Really, really fresh, really fruity, really kind of uplifting. But there's also these others here as well. This one is the winter punch. So let's give this, I imagine you have this hot or cold. It's an iced tea, but I imagine you have it hot or cold. Wow, that is really like a mulled wine. You can have that hot or cold. Very nice. And this one is the baked apple. That's nice. That's probably my favorite. Wow, that is really like a pie baked with apple. Really quite nice. But as I say, these are limited edition flavors just for Christmas, so get in while you can. But there's also a fantastic deal for new customers. If you get in as a new customer, you also get this thermo shaker, so you can have hot or cold drinks. And you can enjoy them as a hot tea in the evening. We often drink hot herbal teas in the evening. And not only is there a fantastic discount, but you can use my discount code on top of the discount, which is £5 off using Barrister 5, or 10% off if you prefer percentages on a larger order or an ongoing order. Just use the code Barrister at the checkout and it will apply that discount for you. The link's in the description. The codes are on screen. Do enjoy the drinks. I've enjoyed them for quite some time now, and as I've promised you before, I would not bring you products that I don't recommend or use myself. I've had these drinks for quite a while now, and if I was to pick a favorite out of today's new ones, it would be the apple, because I love baked apple pies, and this one is really nice. So cheers. So back to those job adverts, one of which is from the Environment Agency. Now, just to caveat, I'm not making a statement of fact here that this advert is discriminatory. I'm just saying that there is a cause to question whether or not this is discriminatory for the reasons that I'll give in this video. And the reason that I say that is I'm not doing an extensive analysis on this. I'm just giving you an overview of what the law says and why it may well be discriminatory. And I do suspect that there may be action to follow against this organisation and several others. So first of all, it says there are 40 jobs available. They are available nationally in various towns and cities, staff grade 2. It's an internship, minimum salary of £24,000, working full-time, and a range of different roles available here. Now, the bit that people are obviously saying they think is potentially discriminatory is the criteria. Not the criteria that they must be studying for a degree and so on, or as part of the application they're in the final year or whatever, but the very first criteria, and that's this one here. So I'll give you an overview of what the law says about this sort of discrimination, because there can be a legal form, a lawful form of discrimination and unlawful discrimination, and it depends on a few things. So first of all, this is what the job advert says. It says the criteria number 1 is that you must, to apply for this internship job, you must be from Black, Asian or minority ethnic background. And then a UK Commonwealth or EEA national. You've got the right to work in the UK. And the criteria is based on the government's agreed list of ethnic groups as used in the 2021 census and includes Asian or British Asian, Black, British, Caribbean, African, mixed, etc., etc. And to see a list of these ethnic groups, to be eligible for the internship, please review the additional information pack attached in the application form. Now, first of all, the reason that this may be perfectly legitimate and perfectly acceptable is that under the Equality Act, whilst ordinarily it would be unlawful to treat any one group less favourably because of a protected characteristic, and that works in reverse. So if you're treating someone else more favourably, then you may be discriminating against the others because they are by default being treated less favourably, and that would include obviously race, religion, sex, gender, orientation, etc. So the reason that this may be okay in some situations is that if they've identified that they are lacking in the diversity within their workforce for a specific category of job, for example, they may be able to tailor an advert that on the face of it might otherwise appear discriminatory if they are working on a proportionate basis to achieve a legitimate aim to satisfy their criteria of diversity in the workplace, and therefore that advert may be okay. So they could provide an incentive, for example, for members of a certain group to apply for that role, and that might be okay. Now, the reason that this may not be okay is that out of these 40 jobs available, none of them, it says here, are available to anyone who is of white British background or white whatever background. You must be Black, Asian or minority background. Now, if there were, let's say, 40 jobs available and 5 of them were available to white or white British or white European or whatever, and the rest to make up the diversity within the whole of the workforce, that may be fine. But this, on the face of it, just excludes everybody, and so may well be discriminatory. I'm not saying that it is, because I haven't looked at the whole of the facts of the workforce, etc. I'm not doing that. But this really is to answer the question, because a lot of people have asked this question about this organisation and other organisations, and so that is the analysis that they would undertake. So if this were to make a determination, I'm not, but if I were, I would have to look at the whole of the workforce, the whole of the way that they've approached their recruitment, and whether or not this is a proportionate means to achieve a legitimate aim on the whole in accordance with the Equality Act. And so hopefully that explains why this may or may not be unlawfully discriminatory. And so hopefully that answers the question. This doesn't just apply to this organisation. I've seen adverts before now where there's a monetary bonus for certain groups to apply for a position. But in 1 or 2 adverts just recently, they've outright excluded anybody who is, on the face of it at least, anybody who is white, white British, white European, and so on. But either way, I hope you found that video interesting and useful. If you do, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel. That helps me grow. And as always, thank you for watching.
That more than 5 out of 7 new homes will go to immigrants.
Well, that's not
the truth, and that's not the
That's
case.
what will happen.
Well, that's not the reality, because
Where the 2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn up? Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social
hang on.
affordable
You can't,
homes
on the
that
one
we're
hand, say
building.
we've got to build this 1.5 million houses, and then say there's plenty of housing already.
There is plenty of housing, Trevor, already, but there's not enough for the people that desperately need it. So the homes, especially under our affordable homes programme, which is social and affordable housing, they will be there for people who desperately need them, local people. We've already outlined how we're going to support veterans and people who are fleeing domestic.
Is there really no housing crisis in the UK? It was this shocking statement made by Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, which caused a real storm of indignation throughout the country for thousands of families who are forced to live in temporary conditions or stand in endless queues for housing. Her words became a real slap in the face, hitting the very heart. She even suggested that migrants should remain a priority in the allocation of housing, which caused anger and bewilderment among many British citizens, forcing them to think about what their place in their own country is.
That must be a tough day, right? When you get cancelled.
Well, you know what? There's two things to this, isn't there? Again, it's a sliding scale. If getting cancelled is being culpable for your actions, then yeah, that's always been around. If getting cancelled is I don't like you as a comedian, I'm burning your DVDs and I'm never coming to one of your shows, that's great. That's their right. If being cancelled is I've just found a 25-year-old email from someone who said the wrong thing in private, and now they've got a top job and we have to destroy.
This is a bitter reality for those who painfully watched the emergence of new residential complexes, only to hear that they will not receive housing. People are at a loss. How can the government turn a blind eye to the needs of 270,000 homeless people and families who desperately need help for the benefit of others? Angela's comments caused more than just controversy, they ignited a real storm of discontent and anger. But what happens when she is confronted with the undeniable facts behind these decisions? Let's figure it out. When pressure began to be put on Angela Rayner over her claims that 5 of the 7 newly built houses in the UK were being handed over to migrants, all eyes were on her, waiting to see how she would handle this difficult situation. And then there was a moment that made everyone think. She got confused in her words, evaded specific answers, and was unable to solve the main problem. It wasn't just a bad response, it was a complete ruse that only made the situation worse and left people even more desperate. How can you remain indifferent to the suffering of your fellow citizens?
You know, and you usually find ulterior motive, because no one really cares about the argument anymore or the principle. They just care about who's saying it. They're trying to take down a general on the other side, and it falls into tribes, you know, and I see it all the time. And you see it more clearly on Twitter because you look at their profile and they've got all their credentials in there, and then they're trying to get someone cancelled who's got the other credentials, and you think, well, you're not even listening to each other now. You've just read each other's bio.
Her lack of a clear answer was a wake-up call. Either she didn't know the facts, or she just didn't want to take them into account. For families who have been waiting for their homes for years, her vague statements have become a real wound, opening up old pains. Why didn't anyone come to the defense of British citizens left without support? Why is none of the authorities willing to explain these decisions that affect people's lives so much? At this moment, Ricky Gervais enters the stage. His reaction was harsh, sarcastic, and, in the opinion of the public, absolutely justified. Ricky Gervais didn't mince words.
Yeah, we just don't know what's happening. All the pressure for Christmas. Do you know the worst thing is, as well? Apart from the pandemic and the devastation and the deaths and the strain on the health service and people losing their livelihoods and that, the worst thing is the charge, do what they want.
When asked about Angela Rayner's comments, he burst out laughing, and this reaction seemed quite appropriate to many. For Gervais, the problem was not only her weak defense, but also the bigger picture, the inability of management to understand the reality in which people live. His wit turned what could have been a simple political mistake into a harsh and merciless criticism of the entire system. In his signature style, Gervais emphasized how detached and distant from real-life politicians like Rayner look. He ridiculed her evasive answers, wondering how a person in such an important position could look so unprepared and indifferent. But his criticism wasn't just about her, it was a cry from the soul, reflecting the growing public discontent towards those in power. The laughter may have been directed at Rayner, but the message was clear. People are losing faith in their leaders, and this causes deep disappointment and anger.
I see all these people saying all the parties they were having and what all the stuff they were doing, and people saying, that was the day I couldn't see my mum in hospital, or I couldn't go to my dad's funeral. And because the people in charge, the posh, privileged people in charge, were acting like Charlie Sheen. I mean, really rubbing salt in the wound.
For Gervais, this distrust is linked to much deeper problems, with a culture of denial that even affects the ability to speak out. Ricky Gervais isn't just tired of politicians, he's frustrated with the toxic culture they helped create. According to him, people are so exhausted by the constant failures of leadership that even telling the truth has become a real risk. The culture of cancellation, in his opinion, is the latest alarming signal that society has lost confidence in itself and its values. He frankly admitted that he has recently become much more careful in his comedic performances. Jokes that once slipped easily from his tongue about politics, social issues, and hypocrisy have now turned into risks that he has never faced before. But Gervais doesn't just blame the cancellation culture. He attributes this to a deep erosion of trust in the government. When people stop believing their leaders, they start watching each other. And this creates a suffocating atmosphere of distrust and fear in which everyone is afraid to express their opinion.
Well, you've been pretty clear. You're glad to see the back of Assad. But how concerned are you about what might happen next?
Well, this is why we want to see the UN resolution implemented and a political solution. Syrians deserve to live in peace and safety, and that's what we want to see implemented. So civilians must be protected, and of course the infrastructure that is so desperately needed as well.
Well, of course, one of the reasons that we are always concerned about this is that the results land up on our shore. There are millions of refugees who've already left Syria, and some of them turn up in Europe, some turn up here. Have you any concerns about that? And what would we do if Syrian refugees start turning up here?
Well, as I said, if Assad has fallen and that regime is over, I welcome that.
Gervais's disappointment is not only his personal feeling, it reflects the general state of a nation that feels overwhelmed, silenced, and left to fend for itself by those in power. What happens when leaders find themselves in a difficult position? For Angela Rayner, it seems the answer is simple: read the script. During the tense parliamentary sessions, Rayner repeatedly faced difficult questions. Instead of taking the initiative or offering original ideas, she resorted to pre-written answers by looking at her notes. For many viewers, this was a clear sign of weakness. How can a person holding such a high position rely on prepared answers when solving the most important national issues? People need leaders who can think for themselves, not just repeat phrases written by their team. This moment only exacerbated public discontent, reinforcing the notion of a disjointed and mechanical leadership. And it's not just the public that is losing patience. Even her own party is starting to show cracks. The divisions within the Labour Party are becoming more and more obvious and cannot be ignored. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you.
There is something truly sinister going on in the UK police right now, and I'm not staying quiet anymore. The UK police have recently been accused of being draconian, authoritarian. Now, when this really came to fruition was when people were getting arrested for things they'd post online. In the UK, we don't have free speech. we have allowed speech, shall we say. You're allowed to think and believe certain things, providing that they don't cause offence, upset, distress to any other person. Such legislation allows for subjectivity, and you also don't need to be made aware of who your accuser actually is. One recent famous example was Alison Pearson, who was visited by police on Remembrance Sunday, of all days, for posting something on Twitter a year ago, of which she then deleted, but somebody somewhere found it offensive. However, it wasn't a crime, it wasn't a hate crime, it was a non-crime hate incident, meaning that you haven't committed a crime, but we're still going to come and we're still going to have a chat with you, and we're still going to put your name on our file so that if you ever have a DBS check, it will turn up and you will be classed as a racist or someone who has been investigated for stirring up hatred. Now, this can have serious effects on people's lives, but remember, it's not a crime. We're just here to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong under the guise of we're here to care for you. However, I'm sad to say that this is just the tip of the iceberg. If people really know the grand scale of things what were happening, then there would be a lot more questions asked of the police. Because not only are the police actively arresting people for things they say online and releasing prisoners, violent individuals back into the community in order to free up people and free up spaces for these thought crime criminals, the police are also pushing unethical and illegal practices in order to boost statistics, to boost funding in realms such as domestic violence. I was a police officer for just under 10 years, and I was a big advocate for investigating domestic violence. I think it's a hideous crime, and I think people that commit it should be held accountable, and victims of crime should be supported in the best possible way from the very start of when the police are called all the way through to conviction. However, unfortunately, the police, what they are now doing is they are projecting their own feelings onto a situation in order to then justify an arrest, in order to then get statistics. And with statistics comes more funding. Examples of this are, the police will get a phone call because two people have had an argument in a domestic setting. The police will arrive and they will say, what's happened? Without any kind of evidence, without any kind of justification. If somebody says, yeah, we had an argument and yeah, I got a little bit scared, that is an assault in the UK. Now people might say, okay, yes, but it's only an allegation, it doesn't mean you're going to prison. Okay, but what that allegation may do is it can alienate the victim from the police because they didn't want them to be arrested. Now, of course, in some domestic circumstances, the victim doesn't always want the perpetrator to be arrested. But this is what we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of these significant instances where there is serious domestic abuse, and if the victim doesn't want to make a complaint, look at the reasons why that is, and also look at how best you can navigate that complex situation in order to still bring the perpetrator to justice. But the cases I'm talking about aren't like that. I'm talking about ordinary, everyday people are being arrested in droves simply because the police were called. The officer goes, well, I think you would have been scared by what you've told me, therefore I'm arresting him based on what I think rather than what you are telling me. The police are fabricating evidence, they are projecting their own feelings onto people in order to not protect the victim. They're saying it's to protect the victim and to stop domestic homicide. But the reality is much different, because when somebody is arrested, they are then taken to custody. When they're in custody, chances are that that case is then passed to another team to investigate. So then why, one, do they need to justify their arrests when they're never going to be questioned about it? And if anything, they will get questioned if they didn't arrest because of the pressure from the senior officers in order to fulfill these statistics. However, what then happens is the case is passed to another unit for them to investigate. They then look at this case and go, there is no evidence here. Why was this person ever arrested? The detained person can then be held for up to 24 hours. And often when there's little evidence, you would think they would be kicked out of custody straight away, probably before even having an interview. But due to the ethos and due to the current state of policing in the UK, when it comes to surrounding issues such as domestic violence and bumping up arrests of domestic violence, those people are often left in a cell to rot, held unlawfully without any evidence whatsoever. This means that officers must then go and interview this suspected domestic perpetrator who's frankly done nothing wrong, and will then go and seek approval from a senior officer for a no further action to happen. However, what is increasingly happening is that the senior officer in charge of making that decision to no further action to release this person without any further conditions or any reprimand, is that they are so captured by the ideology and the statistics and them wanting to climb up higher on their greasy career ladder, is that they're saying, no, we will bail with conditions Petition, because we believe that we can send this to the Crown Prosecution Service as a res geste, victimless prosecution. They know that there will be no prosecution. They know that the Crown Prosecution Service have a certain threshold which crimes and incidents need to hit in order for them even to entertain the idea of a charge. But the police officers in charge of making those decisions don't want to make that decision because then it looks bad on them. This then unfortunately means that this person is then let out on bail, often for months at a time, because the officers in charge of that case are often then under-resourced with the amount of other instance what they have to deal with, meaning that that person then gets left on bail for months and months and months at a time. This can affect people's work, it can affect people's family life, it can affect people's mental health, and there have been instances where people have actually taken their own lives as a result of the stress because they have been wrongly accused of a crime they didn't commit. There was no evidence, there was no support, and instead of the officers who attended that initial incident using their brains and actually investigating this apparent crime prior to arresting, people have arguments. We can't police ordinary daily interactions. This absolute draconian practice must stop, and what you will see is you will see a correlation between the amount of arrests happening and a decrease in the detection rate. However, the police will hail that, look, we take a robust stance on domestic violence because look at all these arrests and look at this arrest increase we have over here, while completely ignoring the detection rate, meaning that more people are being arrested and less people are getting charged. It's a scattergun method of let's shoot at everything and we'll see if something sticks. It's immoral and it's wrong. We should be arresting people when there is a chance of conviction or when it's serious safeguarding concerns. And the difficulty with this is if you have a blanket approach of arrest at every single domestic incident, you are actively missing the key instance what really needs your attention. One, because you have been conditioned to act unfairly and to not ask the right questions. You've been conditioned to not give the right amount of attention and detail required to the instance that require it. You have got very, very inexperienced police officers on the front line. In my old force, 70% of police officers that were frontline officers that you would call and get 999 assistance for had under 3 years experience. Now, of course, everyone has to start somewhere in their career. I'm not faulting the officers, it's not their fault. They are being conditioned and they are being pressured immensely to carry out these unethical practices. And it is causing irrevocable damage to the public. It is meaning that the public will lose faith in police officers. It means that the system is strained due to the extra amount of work. The inexperience in officers means that they are not able to make proper decisions. They do not know the law properly. They are unable to use life experience to determine, is this a crime? Is this likely to result in a conviction? Or is this just something which has gotten a little bit out of hand and they actually just need support? And due to their inexperience, they are less likely to push back when they are being forced to make these unethical decisions. I've had officers turn around to their superior officers at a scene and said, there is no incident here, there's no crime whatsoever, I'm not arresting. And those officers have been reprimanded, those officers have had a senior officer ring them on their phone and demand that they must arrest because of X, Y, and Z. But more importantly, the resources what the police have and the manpower and the time what they can give to a case is diminishing day by day, week by week. And that is a result of this attitude of overreach, unethical practice, and trying to boost up statistics. The most sinister byproduct of this, though, is that we are actually putting victims at risk of further harm. It means that people are not calling the police when they genuinely need help because they are fearful of being punished when they've done nothing wrong. It also means that the people who call the police are not getting the right resources, thus putting them further at risk and meaning that they are more likely to withdraw support due to the stress and the lack of communication from the officers in the case. And it isn't the officers in the case fault. They are trying their best. They simply just cannot manage under the demanding workload. I've heard of some serious horror stories when it comes to this practice. There was a male arrested for non-fatal strangulation. He'd strangled his partner to the point where he'd caused a bruising, she could barely breathe. This behaviour happening is a huge indicator of homicide as it increases the chance of homicide by 7-fold. So therefore you would think, okay, well, this person's been arrested for this, we need to get onto the victim as soon as possible. But that isn't what happened. The police arrested the male, put him into custody, and then no one went to speak to the victim because the police officers that made the arrest went back to the station, completed their handover, passed it to another team, and that other team was sinking by the minute, that victim was left wondering what was going to happen for 12 hours, and then the suspect was released without any kind of evidence whatsoever, because they had not spoken to the victim. And they hadn't spoken to the victim simply because they didn't have the resources to do so. So we can say that we're doing this blanket approach to prevent homicide. And yet when we do this blanket approach, we don't support the victim who we are trying to protect. So the system is clearly failing. The real reason why this practice is happening is to do with money. Because if the police can present statistics to the Home Office when it comes to the budget, then that means they're likely to get more funding. So that's the benefit to the organisation. However, it's normally a particular officer that will bring in this ethos and will roll it out across the force, meaning that even though that they know what they're doing is wrong, they will get a promotion out of it due to the bump in statistics. So it's for personal gain too. So the organisation is there for themselves, and the people putting forward this unethical practice are there for themselves too. At what point is it there for the public? And the reason why I know it's about money is because on my channel I used to speak heavily about domestic violence, about this topic of domestic violence. I wanted to raise awareness of not only the traits of domestic violence perpetrators so that people can get the support themselves without needing the police, but also to educate the police in treating people fairly and looking at something objectively and actually investigating an incident before they decide to arrest. Because taking away someone's freedom, putting them in a cell for hours on end and then putting them on bail for months at a time can have serious mental health impacts on somebody. I would make content to try and help people who were potentially going through something bad, using my channel, use my knowledge and my platform, because when I was in the police, I was a domestic violence specialist. I did my own research on narcissism, psychopathy, borderline personality disorder, how to identify somebody who is being gaslit, who is being manipulated, who has become codependent, and who has even completely diminished the abuse which they are facing. I was trained to do all that, and I did a lot of that training myself, as well as some additional courses which have been accredited for in the police. As a result of me making this content, which I believed was to help people, I was then dragged into my office, and my senior officer sat there and told me under no circumstances was I allowed to continue to create such content in order to help people, because, and I quote, it was upsetting our partners. So the partner agencies that work alongside the police were getting upset at me because I was taking their business away from them. So let's think about it. Two people have an argument, the police arrive, police make an arrest, that person is then charged, NFA'd, whatever, but the police get the arrest statistic, therefore they can present that to the Home Office when it comes to their budget review. Then what happens is the domestic violence services and the charities in place to then support the victims can then support that victim, and they will get funding for that too. If I don't raise awareness and crisis happens, somebody gets hurt, organisations make money. If I do raise awareness and I stop that from happening and they decide to leave the relationship, nothing happens. No police call, no support from domestic violence services, no money. I was told to stop talking about domestic violence online because it benefited the organisation who are there to apparently protect people and support victims of domestic abuse. The police and the organisations involved would rather you need to call them and would rather you have to be hurt in order for that to happen, rather than you be made aware of the trait and you leave before that ever happens, because it's all to do with money. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to my Patreon only section and discuss some real life events which I've been involved in, which will make your head spin. They claim that the force that I was working for and others further afield were deliberately breaking the law daily to impose their own political ideology and ethos onto the public. And sadly, this is the state of modern policing right now. It's draconian, it's authoritarian, the overreach is too much. The officers that are given the power to make such decisions oftentimes should not be in that position. And you certainly don't expect it to be arrested for posting something on Facebook when they're letting out burglars. People want the burglars arrested and to keep in prison. People don't want the people online posting things. People don't want to be so fearful of having an argument with their partner that the police are called. And people also don't want to be so scared of calling the police when there is a serious domestic incident situation unfolding, control and coercive behaviour, abuse, and they call the police and they're not believed, or they are believed and then they're just left alone. They're believed in the sense of the police will make an arrest, but they won't give them the support afterwards. And we also don't want people that are arrested wrongly and the police justifying that the arrest was necessary, proportionate, justified, completely based off a statistics quota and the model they're trying to reinforce. and then that person is left on bail for months and months, and their life is irrevocably changed forever and ruined. But like I said, this is the state of modern policing, and it's truly, truly awful what's happening. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And also, if you want to hear more about these kind of stories, then click the link in my description below, and there is a link to my up-and-coming book, The Job is Fucked, The Secret Diary of a Police Officer, currently available for pre-order on Amazon at the time of making this video. But click it anyway, because it might be out by the time you watch it.
The British public could be forgiven for thinking that Ed Miliband is a pathological liar and a numpty who sleeps in a high-vis jacket and a hard hat. He's had a shocker this morning. He was unable to account for £43,000 of taxpayers' money spent allegedly on refurbishing his own office.
British people have paid £130,000 to the government since you came into power for offices to be redecorated and have new furniture. Of the £130,000, £43,000 has gone to the Net Zero Department, DESNZ. What's it paid for, Mr Miliband?
Well, I have no idea, Nick.
So you've been in receipt of £43,000 of £130,000.
Honestly, come on, honestly, you know, look, I'm worrying about the nation's energy system. I'm trying to get the nation's energy system right. I don't know.
You're not aware of this refurbishment?
No, I'm not.
Have you got a new chair?
Well, it's not the only money problem he's got. He is refusing to answer whether or not he declared a £4 million donation to the Labour Party and a £99,000 donation to himself from an organisation that has links to the woman that he has just appointed as his climate envoy. We asked him if he declared that money, because if not, there would be serious allegations of corruption and cronyism, and he is refusing to answer the question. All he can say is...
The message from government is we've got to build this energy infrastructure for energy security, for good jobs, for lower bills, and indeed to tackle the climate crisis.
And that woman got the job on her own merits, of course. This isn't the only time that people have accused him of being a little bit dodgy. He said an independent report by the National Energy Systems Operator that completely vindicated all of his madcap radical policies. Well, he said it was independent. And then it turned out that Ed Miliband happened to be the person of significant control at that company, seemingly with the power to hire and fire the bloke running it. And it called into question how independent that report really was. Now, Ed Miliband refuses to comment on this when we put it to him. There's a theme here, isn't there? But, and I am at pains to stress this, the NESO website says that there is an operational separation between the minister and the company, and that everything is completely above board, and Ed Miliband couldn't do anything wrong even if he wanted to. But you can decide, can't you? Later today, Ed Miliband wanted to talk to you about wind turbines.
Talking for 1 minute as we walk the length of this 108-metre wind turbine blade without hesitation, deviation or repetition about clean energy. Chris.
Look at the size of this thing. This monster is going to be in the seas around.
He wants to classify wind turbines and solar farms as nationally significant infrastructure projects, which will strip residents, communities and councils of their powers to block, amend or delay green energy projects, which Mr Miliband wants to build across swathes of your countryside. Problems. Yesterday, just 8.3% of electricity came from wind. Gas was the main one. And this actually meant that if you have a heat pump, 3/4 of heat yesterday came from fossil fuels. Offshore wind, well, he wants loads of it. Problems. A site called Sea Green generated an impressive quantity of power in the first 10 months of this year, which earned its operators £70 million. But they were paid almost as much to switch its turbines off. At least £57 million. In total, we spent £1 billion turning wind turbines off so that it didn't surge the grid. Ed Miliband said he'd make your energy bills come down. Your bills are going up a lot. And now he's trying to backtrack on Radio 4 today.
They're not saying that there's a guarantee of any sort that bills will come down.
They're not saying it's a guarantee, but what I'm saying
they're not even predicting it.
We're confident based on what they are saying is it will lead to lower wholesale costs of electricity. If you look at their a document, Nick. That's what it sets out, and it can lead to lower bills.
Perhaps, all based on one scenario about what gas prices will be. But you don't have any control over gas prices, and neither do they. This is guesswork, isn't it?
No, it isn't.
OK. He said that he'd create jobs. Those jobs do not currently exist. But there have been thousands of real jobs lost at steelworks, coal plants, oil rigs, etc. But the worst thing is his sums don't add up. He says that renewables will generate about £40 billion in investment. But those companies are just going to pass that cost on to you, the customer. And he's already spent the entire black hole, 22 billion quid, on carbon capture projects in the northeast. Oh, and now his own cabinet colleagues are turning on him. Wes Streeting threw him under the bus a little bit on Question Time over his role in not bombing Assad in Syria. In just one day, Ed Miliband has shown that he doesn't really feel like he needs to justify losing 43 grand of your money. He refuses to answer questions about alleged cronyism and corruption, and he doesn't seem to mind lying to you.
Using the internet without a VPN is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. We want to help protect you. This video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the VPN to help keep you safe. Now, you might be asking, what is a VPN? Well, a virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network, such as at airports, coffee shops, friends' houses, or even in your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. Hackers that are connected to the same Wi-Fi network have the ability to steal your personal data with ease. T-Mobile reached a settlement this year with the US Federal Communications Commission after they suffered data breaches in 2021, 22, and 23. In 2023 alone, over 37 million customers' data was exposed. And it's not just hackers to be concerned about. Information can be censored. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news content that you love. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one Private Internet Access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. Plus, we've got a huge GB News discount. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get 83% off PIA. That is under £2 a month, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So head to piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Let's get our thoughts on my panel. Former Conservative MP Anna Firth, Director for the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity Stephen Wolfe, and the former Labour Party advisor Matthew Torbet. Anna, I'll start with you on this. Do you think Ed Miliband's all right?
I think it's deeply disrespectful to working people to laugh. You know, it's bad enough not to know where money is being spent in your department, but then to just laugh when £43,000 has just gone astray. I mean, £43,000 is a lot of money to working people. But the thing about Ed Miliband is he promised us we would see a reduction in our bills of £300. The only £300 we've actually seen since the election are the pensioners who've lost it. So, you know, he hasn't been being honest with us, and the problems that we've had this week just show us that his ideas that we can just flood the whole countryside with wind turbines and solar panels are not going to work.
Yeah, there are some issues when it comes to this idea that the Labour Party received about £4 million quid plus a £99,000 donation to himself from a company that has links to his current climate envoy. And look, she may well have got that job on her own merit. I mean, she seems like she is qualified, and I'm not trying to, disrespect the lady here at all. However, he doesn't seem to want to answer whether or not he declared that money, and that should be quite an easy yes or no question, shouldn't it?
Of course it should.
If he'd have declared it. That might be why he's not answering us. You know, I can't really offer up a...
It's down the back of his chair.
No, I think there's I remember during this feeds back into optics and how the Labour Party's communications operation has been, quite frankly, dreadful for the last decade. At least, and certainly since I was involved, I would be pulling my hair out and continue to do so. I think it's the same thing of the Lord Ali donation stuff. Like, how could this look? You might be doing everything above board, but you've got to remember politics is a cynical business, and how will this look? So she might well be prominent enough, but therefore why have we not been full and frank enough?
Do you ultimately think that he might be slightly on the right track in terms of us needing to go green a bit, though?
I think you need to have... The problem is you've got to bring people with you for a start. So when Sadiq Khan got it all wrong with you, Les, I think I was part of a group that said you need to be offering a much more generous scrappage scheme. Not everyone can afford to just go out in the next 5 years and buy a green car or whatever else. You need to be offering people the right money to be able to do that, and that way you win people over. I think you do need to entice people with money and whatnot, but it needs to be varied.
And, Stephen, just on the wind turbines, because what you really wanted today to be about, Ed Miliband, was wind turbines, and I'm starting to wonder whether or not he wants every day to be about wind turbines. but what he wanted was that, and his main ambition, it seems, is to change planning laws, etc., so that you can't object to wind turbines in your area. Problem for him being that we spent about £1 billion since the start of the year turning wind turbines off so that we didn't surge the grid, and then at times when we might need them, like yesterday, there wasn't enough wind, and something like only 8.3% of our energy, I think, was generated by wind. It actually works out more expensive.
Yeah, maybe he likes wind turbines because he's so full of wind. And he quite enjoys it. I mean, we just talking about it. I haven't only just recognised that he looks like Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. Well, lots of people have seen that.
Yeah,
to be honest,
there's enough to criticise him here for without
what I'm saying today is that was his Bacon moment again when he was raised about whether he knew how much money he had in the chair. You know, and did he know whether he's got a new chair? What the point really about Ed Miliband is he's spending money that is not necessarily in the right direction. We've been talking about it in the green room. We're just about to launch a new nuclear station that cost us £46 billion, but it will heat with electricity 6 million homes. There are only 30 million homes or dwellings, as the government calls them, in this country. Therefore, for 5 nuclear power stations at £46 billion apiece, we would be able to actually provide electricity for all the houses in this country. We had another 2, we provide enough for all the businesses in this country. And I would argue that if we spent that £46 billion, we'd be able to provide free energy plus savings the costs across the spectrum. We wouldn't have to have wind farms. We wouldn't have to have solar panels. We wouldn't have to have carbon capture. All that money is wasted. And as Alan raised the point, 2 of those nuclear power stations at £46 billion apiece is the same cost as HS2. Right. Why don't we spend it on that? Then he'd be out of a job and we'd be quite happy with free electricity.
I totally agree with what Stephen's saying about nuclear is the way to go. What I wouldn't want is the government actually building these stations themselves, because we've seen what's happened with HS2. As soon as the government gets involved, the costs skyrocket and generally you get a worse result. But Ed, you mentioned yesterday, but what about on Tuesday? On Tuesday, the wind farms could only power 3 to 4% of the grid. So 96 or 97% of our energy on Tuesday had to come from other sources. So we have to have a balanced energy supply in this country.
The question mark, I suppose, would be whether or not Ed Miliband has gone so far down the rabbit hole and backed himself into a corner, really. Like, he might genuinely believe it. And earlier on, I said, maybe he's a pathological liar. Right, I was kind of joking there. I mean, I think there are things that he's been pretty fruity with the truth on, right, to say the least, and I have outlined those. However, I do also think that what we might be looking at here is a man who does genuinely believe, to the point of being borderline radical in this stuff, and is willing to for us all to make certain sacrifices in order for that to happen. And I wonder if we are hurtling towards blackouts, because what the heck do we do when 2030 rolls around and we're supposedly 95% reliable on renewable energy?
It's not going to happen.
And we haven't got the grid for it.
It's not going to happen.
But what does Labour do then about the blackouts, do we think?
That's if they're going to come down the tracks. I will not pretend to be any sort of expert on the climate. What I would say is that I always found Ed to be very arrogant, actually, I must admit, with my time in the party. But... And he knows best, but at the end of the day, that's his attitude, and, you know, that's the way I found him. What I will say is that I know one of his special advisors very well, and he's one of the most intelligent people I've met in politics, very normal, sort of gets it. I hope, therefore, that is the advice he would be listening to on this sort of stuff. But no, we've got, again, for me, you've got to have a varied... The only thing that worries me about nuclear, though, is I remember Tony Benn saying many years ago, when he was in a similar position to Ed Miliband, some sort of energy secretary under Clement Attlee, is he said you could never find a safe way of disposing of nuclear waste, and we still haven't found one yet. And the second thing was, all that happened with the nuclear energy plants is they became bomb-making plants for the US, and Clement Attlee didn't bother to tell him, which is why he resigned. So I worry a little bit about relying solely, therefore, on nuclear, but I do think there's totally a place for offshore wind and other
Elon Musk
sorts of things.
being able to have rockets that we can actually dispense them out into space.
Just one final point on it, just on this, Andy, though. If he's not across this money being spent on his own office, does that bode that well for us when it comes to him being in charge of our entire national grid? I mean, he couldn't say... He couldn't even come up with an answer. He was asked, by the way, the same question on an interview with Good Morning Britain as well, and he hadn't formulated an answer by then. I mean, has there been any redevelopment of his office for £43,000? Is this just a bloke who doesn't seem to care about wasting public money?
He either doesn't care or he's not the brightest bulb in the box, is the way I would see it. But I actually think this is a really, really serious issue. Yeah. I mean, we have to have cheaper energy. At the moment, we've got, you know, some of the most expensive energy in Europe. We are not going to be a competitive global economy if we don't sort out our energy. So we have got to have a balanced energy approach. It's rushing at this headlong pace at net zero, when in fact we've already seen only this week that when the wind doesn't blow or the sun isn't out, we are going to have blackouts. It's a disaster.
All right, OK, well, so, look, again, I will stress categorically that on that issue of the NESO and the independent research thing, their website could not be clearer that there is operational separation between Ed Miliband and their a particular set of research, and obviously, as we know, Ed Miliband himself is categorical in the idea that what he is doing is completely correct, and we will all reap the dividends in the long run.
Can I issue one last bit of advice to Ed Miliband? Don't ever laugh during an interview. I used to hate... From a comms point of view, you come across so condescending, so out of touch with people that are struggling. I hated it when any boss of mine did that. I said, don't ever do that again.
43 grand is more than the average annual salary.
Absolutely.
Considerably more.
And to say that that's just gone. Poof, that's just gone.
I do think there's a bit of gotcha journalism of trying to catch him out figures, but either way, don't laugh. Just say don't.
Maybe you can't just take a joke.
Maybe. There we go. Keir Starmer and his cabal of metropolitan, city-dwelling, dinner-party-going, lovey elite have gone to war with farmers, and it's a war they'll lose. They chose to bite the hand that feeds Britain. The only problem for them is that this hand hits back.
So proud of being part of this community, but not just proud. Every single one of these farmers doesn't want to be here today. They want to be home, they want to be watching after their livestock, they want to be tending to their crops and being with their families. But what they have done, they've come here in solidarity to show how frustrated they are with this stupid inheritance tax and a lot of other things as well that are damaging British agriculture. We need to feed the nation in an affordable, seasonal, healthy way, and we've done that since day dot. London wouldn't be here without farmers, nor would any of the other big cities. We feed everybody once, twice or 3 times every day, but these people in their ivory towers have no understanding of the importance of the farmers, the countryside, the community and everything we bring.
Oh, gosh. Yes, I was at that farmers' protest earlier today. Remember when Keir Starmer said this?
We have been very clear that for working people, we are not going to increase their taxes. So that means we are not increasing income tax, national insurance or VAT.
For working people, we will not be increasing their taxes. Well, he has decided to tax the hardest working people in Britain, hasn't he? Just listen to this 18-year-old lad here who is the very best of British.
I used to be here at 4 o'clock in the morning, going out to do milking cows at 5 o'clock and other duties down there, and then we'd finish 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. That's our normal time, but they could carry on till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. There's no end of day. It's go to work, carry on working, 2 hours sleep, back out to harvest again in summer. So it's never ending.
Up at the crack of dawn, gets a few hours sleep, then he's back out to work again. And now this Labour government has stolen his future. But it goes deeper than that. This is an assault on the British countryside, the rural way of life. And once it's gone, we'll never get it back. The metropolitan Labour lovies, they won't understand this because they think the entire country is just like North London. But this is British culture we're talking about here.
I personally think it's part of our heritage. This has gone on for years and years and years, generation after generation, and it's going to stop because of this. And because a farmer never sells his land, but they'll make them sell it now because the land stays in the family for years, and for many years, and they take their profit from working the land. It's just wrong, completely wrong. It's our heritage, as I say.
Labour seem happy for people like Bill Gates and BlackRock to own the countryside.
Well, Bill Gates has got his finger in a lot of pies. You know, he owns half of the farmland in America. He was here just before the budget in number 10. And he's also very involved in so-called health, you know, telling us that we need to stop eating meat and start eating fake meat, okay? And he's also...
Yeah, and many of these farmers can barely make ends meet. I mean, listen to this Labour MP on Politics Live today. Listen to what comes tumbling out of her mouth like a torrent of ignorant diarrhea.
Come from a country where, or my family come from a country where there are lots of farmers. Quite hard to find a poor farmer.
Well, let me tell her this. She's about to meet several poor farmers. And the farmers I spoke to are considering strike action, so she might not be so snarky then. But with hundreds of tractors outside the House of Commons, well, you know, look at that. Just look at that. What a picture that is. What an image. Thousands of people were there supporting the farmers today. Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, decided to ask this question at the start of PMQs.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister didn't seem to want to talk about appointing fraudsters to his cabinet. In fact, he seemed to want to talk about immigration. So let's talk about immigration.
Yeah, I mean, look, hey, I obviously quite enjoy talking about immigration regularly on this show, but, I mean, that was an open goal out there, Kemi. Well, what's she thinking? You know, go off on the farmers, all right? And what has our state broadcaster, the BBC, made of this protest? I did a quick scan of their homepage on the news there before I came on air. Well, they haven't really put it on the main homepage of their news site. As far as I can tell, anyway, they don't really seem to care that much. They don't think that's a top story, do they? Well, we care here at GB News, and we care because of stuff like this.
This is a lifetime of work. It's the heritage.
The president of the National Farmers Union there fighting back tears as he talks about this needless farmer death tax. And it is needless because Labour hopes that it will raise around 500 million quid and they are giving away more than 500 million quid in foreign aid to foreign farmers. I mean, this is the kind of economics that could only be drawn up by someone who allegedly lied on her CV to become Chancellor. If the farmers do decide to strike, Britain will back the farmers over Keir Starmer. Let's go.
Using the internet without a VPN is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. We want to help protect you. This video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the VPN to help keep you safe. Now you might be asking, what is a VPN? Well, a virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network, such as at airports, coffee shops, friends' houses, or even in your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. Hackers that are connected to the same Wi-Fi network have the ability to steal your personal data with ease. T-Mobile reached a settlement this year with the US Federal Communications Commission after they suffered data breaches in 2021, 22 and 23. In 2023 alone, over 37 million customers' data was exposed. And it's not just hackers to be concerned about. Information can be censored. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news content that you love. Private internet access is available for all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one private internet access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. Plus, we've got a huge GB News discount. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get 83% off PIA. That is under £2 a month, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So head to piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally.
Thoughts on my panel. We've got the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. We've got business and activist as well, Adam Brooks, and the journalist and broadcaster, Nina Mishkov. Yeah, Mark, I mean, there's a heck of a lot to go out here, but firstly, do Labour just need to U-turn on this now and get it over with?
Yes, I mean, they have waited so long. I mean, it's always problematic for a government if you U-turn. So sometimes, even if you realise you've made a mistake, and I'm not sure that penny's dropped yet, you're loath to U-turn because it's such a loss of credibility. I suspect they will try and find some nuanced way out of this. They'll put it out to consultation. They'll slightly redesign exactly how inheritance tax applies so it doesn't actually apply to any farmer that's actually working in some way. They will be working around the clock to find out if they can insert some new sub-paragraph that renders this fine. At the moment, though, they are treating farmers like fools. I mean, the suggestion is, oh, this is hardly going to affect any of you. So why are these guys turning up in their tractors outside Parliament? I trust the farmers' judgment of whether it's going to affect them. There was a thing that it was reasonable for the government to solve, that the way we treat inheritance tax on farms does mean that there's an attraction for very rich billionaires to buy up farmland, not farm, and pass it on inheritance tax free. We've got to find a way of sorting out that loophole.
Well,
but you can
that.
surely... Yeah, stop that.
Stop that.
But they thought they'd close this off, but they're probably going to end up launching an assault on British heritage, which, for 500 million quid, what an idiotic political battle to fight.
This notion as well that, oh, well, the farmers have to pay to fund our NHS.
One day.
What's that, like a day, is it? Right, so we'll raffle off the British countryside to these multinational corporations.
To run the NHS for 24 hours.
To run the NHS for 24 hours.
Look, again, I was there today as well. Good to see you was there.
Yeah.
Now, it angers me that the BBC haven't given this really any airing, because
I watched it on the BBC tonight at 6 o'clock news.
Very, as Patrick said, the website that's seen by millions. It's hardly any.
But the news actually on the telly was there. Okay, but, I watched it on the BBC News.
This is important. There was about 300 or 400 tractors on the roads outside Parliament today. I've never seen anything like it. It was so impressive, and I spoke to farmers, and the anger is off the charts. Look, when people on social media say, oh, why shouldn't the farmers pay inheritance tax? The average Brit, like us, does not contribute to feeding the nation. These put food in our supermarkets, food on our table. It's a generational industry where you can't just learn farming overnight. It's not an industry where if it all went wrong, we can bring the army in and they can sort it. No. It takes years to learn how to farm. These are experts in their field. And
Jeremy Clarkson's done pretty well for himself.
Labour is doing their
pretty
best
quickly
to ruin that. And I think they've picked a fight they cannot win. And if they decide not to put the food in the supermarket and go on strike, I back them with that.
Does it concern you, Nina, at all that people like Bill Gates and some of these corporations and funds or whatever, like BlackRock, could just buy up vast swathes of the British countryside and serve as goodness knows what tripe.
Well, I think what Keir Starmer has tried to do, and very crudely and badly, is to prevent that happening, to stop wealthy people from using this as a way to sidestep inheritance tax, putting their money into land, and that's who he's tried to grab. And unfortunately, like in fishing, if you put the net out and you want the big tuna, you get the little fish as well. Now he needs to actually fish with a much finer net, if you see what I mean. I think that, first of all, I'd like to say that actually farmers are often stuffed more by the supermarkets than they are by the government. They are pared down to the bone with their profits. And also, my grandfather, my Scottish grandfather, was a farmer. My grandmother won the gold medal for butter making at the Kilmarnock Dairy School in 1920. Yes, there we go. So anyway, I obviously have a feeling for that. I do think that what they will do, and you can't back down, they won't back down. Perhaps they just change the entry level, so they make it 5 million. Now, if they made it 5 million...
That's a U-turn still, though, isn't it?
Well, the interesting thing is that you two guys were there today, but it wasn't sponsored by the National Farmers Union, because they are the ones who have to make the...
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the president of the NFU, I think, was inside crying about the whole thing.
Yes, but the thing is, the NFU needs to sit down with the government, and they will work something out.
I spoke to a lot of farmers today, and I did want to try to gauge the mood on the potential for a strike. And it was unanimous, really. Which is look, we don't want to, but if it is a choice between that or our very existence, then we'll do it.
Yeah.
And I really wonder if that's around the corner.
Well, it could well be, and to look at the Labour government's behaviour so far, if you go on strike, you get a big pay rise. So the message has been sent out that this is a highly successful way of defending your livelihood. I'd be surprised if they don't do it, unless Labour can find, it might be that Nina and I are slightly on the same page here, some elegant way to resolve this. But my God, they are taking their time. And I think a strike would force them to do that if they don't come to the table beforehand.
You know, one of the criticisms, Adam, of Keir Starmer and that cohort that he surrounds himself with is that they are actually governing for a very small group of people. They are essentially metropolitan levies.
I think that's an exaggeration.
I'm sorry, but well, OK, fine. But I'll come to you after Adam on this. But I think this policy for me sums that up. These are not people who think about the wider. They think their entire life is Islington.
But what are they going to?
So wrong.
What are they going to do when their favourite coffee shop can't feed them with their favourite sausage?
Yeah.
You know, these people are going to be up in arms about that. But
as soon as you say these people, you're drawing battle lines that don't exist, that really don't exist. The metropolitan elite, for heaven's sake.
But what is Keir Starmer then? Look, I'm sorry, but what is Keir Starmer? What is Rachel?
Keir Starmer's...
What are these people who very rarely ever seem to venture out of the North London bubble, who make decisions like this, whose entire...
Why do you have to have mud on your shoes to be a real person? That's such a ridiculous... You don't know that they don't go out there.
Most of his time traipsing the corridors of various different courts, representing some pretty characters,
it's just ridiculous.
Nina, the fact that Keir Starmer could not define what a working person was says it all. Look, one thing I do want the viewers to realise, and this was speaking to farmers today, the average salary of a farmer or earnings of a farmer is between 30 and 70 grand a year. These are not the rich elite. These are people that get up at 3 or 4 in the morning, as the young man said, and work their socks off for little gain. Yes, they're asset rich in some cases. They use them assets to feed us.
I mean, the other thing here, right, which you touched on there, Patrick, is I'm going to stand up for a bit of diversity, because there isn't much diversity in the cabinet. They're nearly all from the public sector, backgrounds in law or think tanks or special advisors, and you've obviously got Rachel from complaints as well. And I fear that they don't have a wide enough spread of knowledge of different sectors of society.
Yes, but did the last government?
Well, maybe not. But
absolutely.
Actually, I think the Conservatives did have more of a relationship with the farming community.
They didn't have a relationship with reality, never mind the farming community.
Who around the cabinet table was likely to put their hand up and say, Do you realise what this is going to do if you proceed with it? And you need 2 or 3 people around the cabinet table to flag those sort of things.
They are a very new government and they're making mistakes, and this is a mistake.
They need a wider and deeper representation of different sectors around that cabinet table. Nobody's ever run a business who's sitting around the cabinet table, not one of them, and there's hardly any private sector experience apart from Rachel.
But they're not a bunch of money grabbers who are just out to fleece the public.
OK, well, I'm judging this government, not the previous one.
OK, well,
we've got to compare it.
For a government that might at times struggle with the perception that they don't particularly like Britain, now that might be unfair, right? Lots of people say that's unfair. But for a government that struggle with that perception, this isn't a great way to go about it, is it? Having a massive pop at a load of people who, for many people, kind of literally embody Britain. You've got the kind of barber jackets on, you're out there farming the land, you're driving your tractors and you're living in the rural British countryside. I mean, stiffing them is not a great...
Owning a barber jacket is not a passport to being a proper British person. That is so ridiculous, Patrick, and you know it.
Population makes you a proper person.
I know the value of farmers, and the thing is, the Labour government have made a mistake in this case, and they need to put it right.
Look, they've made a mistake in many cases. They've attacked farmers, pensioners, students, working people. If we knew this before the election, they wouldn't have won.
You know what I think it was something, well, we should touch on this, because I know, like, I'm, broadly quite, a fan of Kemi Badenoch. She sat on this sofa. I thought she was good. She did a great interview. Not knocking her. Unfair.
Why not? Why not?
Because I don't want to. I don't. She hasn't really done anything, as far as I could tell so far, for me to really warrant knocking her.
Make lame jokes.
Apart from today, I think it was an open goal. You could probably hear that farmers' protest from inside that chamber there in Westminster, and to not go off on it at PMQs, I thought was a massive.
She was concentrating on writing a bad joke for primary
preparation for PMQs is quite an art, and you do have to make a decision about what topic you're going to go on. And I have no idea why they picked immigration. Immigration is going to be an issue that she's got to return to again and again and again, and is a bit of a sticky wicket for the Conservatives, given the record of the last Conservative government. But she's got to face it. She can't not talk about immigration. But today, I would have thought it was clear as day that she had to go on agriculture.
You've got Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe outside amongst the farmers, getting support, going up in the polls. This is a terrible miscalculation.
It was a tactical error.
I think within 6 months, Reform are going to be the second party by a long way.
I was going to say Nigel Farage is a consummate politician, and he will take every chance to push himself forward, whereas Kemi Badenoch hasn't learned that yet. But if we come back to what you call the metropolitan elite, that is absolutely so unfair, and the implication that they don't care for Britain or don't love their country is arrant nonsense. How can you possibly say that? What makes you say that?
You used to want to abolish the monarchy.
Well, who does? Not the entire government doesn't. Maybe one or two. I don't know. Maybe there's somebody in the cabinet who does, but I don't think I've ever heard of that. They don't want to manage to abolish the monarchy.
Nina, is not so much that they necessarily hate Britain or don't love the country.
Patrick said it.
But my fear is more that there are large parts of Britain that they don't understand. That's the problem. It's not necessarily that they're malicious. It's just, as I was saying, it's too narrow a cohort of ideological outlook and background around that cabinet
Now,
table.
moving on from that, leaked documents have revealed the European Union is set to demand access to the United Kingdom's fishing waters and freedom of movement for students as part of a post-Brexit trade deal. This comes as Sir Keir Starmer looks to reset relations with the EU after entering 10 Downing Street back in July. So would granting concessions to the EU amount to a betrayal of that vote for Brexit? Well, let's see what my panel think of that. Former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and the political commentator Duncan Box. Scarlett, the fact of the matter is here, I don't think it was just limited to students, young people under the age of 30, right? That's the rumour.
It was 18 to 30. Look, if you go into negotiations, when you go in, both sides are quite far apart, and then you come together. We want things, they want things. If we want them, we're going to have to trade. There will be some compromise, right? I mean, they're not going to get what they want. We're not going to get everything that we want. I mean, one of the things is actually the first thing that everybody, a lot of people are desperate for is what's called the veterinary stuff, which is that you can send animals in and out, and actually remember, we haven't had a deal. That's the problem. Is that we've had all this stuff, and mostly it's been stuck because of Northern Ireland. That's where it all gets silly. And so if we want a deal, right, it's not going to be like Boris Johnson promised, that we're going to have everything. Plus, is that if we want a deal, we're going to have to compromise. So we've got to decide what it is we want and what we compromise on.
Duncan, the compromise part is the worry here, because a lot of viewers are of the view that actually the man would sell us out faster than Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
I'm sympathetic to that view, and I think Scarlett's right. This is the beginning of horse trading, right? And this is how it works. But I think you're right as well, Darren. You're dealing with a man who, in my view, Sir Keir Starmer, I think will have a bias towards doing whatever he can to get us closer to the European Union again. I also don't think he's the strongest of leaders. Listen, I don't want to rehearse the Brexit arguments of 8 years ago. I think we all have the scars. I wanted Brexit to work. I believe any country, if it wants to be its own independent country, should be. There was a mandate there, but the political class in this country let the people down. And Brexit didn't turn out to be the Brexit that I think a lot of people voted for. I think what is really interesting about this story is it's going to start to give more ammunition to people like Nigel Farage and Reform UK, because if people start to think that we're moving closer towards the European Union, you can bet your bottom dollar or euro that what will happen is Farage will leap on that and will use it as a campaigning tool. And the problem is the Conservatives fought tooth and nail with each other over Brexit. Labour tried to stop Brexit. Reform can clear up here. And I think, unless Starmer is really hard in these negotiations, you're going to see Reform UK leap on that.
I used to have to use the razor that my ex-girlfriend used to shave her legs. It scratched me and it made me feel weird. But fear not, because Manscaped is back with a game changer. This isn't just any old shaver. We're talking about the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. One for that baby smooth look, and another when you want to keep it a bit rugged. Get this, it's waterproof. You can use it in the shower, by the pool, or even while scuba diving if that's your thing. This beauty runs for 75 minutes on a single charge. That's enough time to shave your face, your mate's face, and still have juice left over for touch-ups. You'll also get their Power Shave Gel for a proper wet shave experience, and a face shave soother to keep your mug looking fresh and irritation-free. It's like having a barber in your bathroom, minus the awkward small talk. Click the link in the description and use the code GBN for a whopping 20% off and free shipping with the code GBN at manscaped.com. Join the 11 million blokes worldwide who trust Manscaped. Your face will thank you, and so will your wallet.
And Scarlett, the key point there, which is a good one, is that actually you have an incoming administration in the United States of America as well. We're looking at a time in which France and Germany, both the top players within the European Union, have political turmoil at the moment. I think it's safe to say that's probably an understatement.
Yes, I think you're correct,
so
Darren.
So surely Sir Keir Starmer's going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place here, with the Americans wanting him to be closer to them and the EU saying, actually, we could do with Britain right now.
Yeah, but what we have to understand is that the reason we haven't so far got a trade deal with America was because that had to be a deal too, right? And I think one of the things they were offering us that we really didn't want was chlorinated chicken. I mean, what we have to look at is I think the latest poll said that people were willing to go, they wanted to go back into the single market, because actually the problem is that the deal or the non-deal we've got at the moment is costing us a lot of money. So we've got to see. But as far as the under-30s go, we've got that deal with Australia and New Zealand, My daughter spent 2 years in Australia working, playing, doing all sorts of things quite happily. We have masses of Australians and New Zealanders over here. I mean, actually, when we used to have young people from Europe over here, I have to say, they worked incredibly hard. They worked in the cafes. everywhere you went, you found young Europeans, and then they they were at the universities. I don't quite understand why we're so against having young people from Europe and allowing our young people to go to Europe. I mean, that would be the deal.
I mean, on that point there, the immigration point, 1.5 million homes Labour are saying they want to build.
Yeah.
Apparently, we don't have the builders.
No.
So is that going to be another way in which they say, well, look, you know, we need people from Europe because we need the immigration?
Possibly. I mean, you know, I'm relatively relaxed when it comes to immigration, though I have a very different view on what is illegal immigration, and maybe we'll touch on that a little bit.
But 1 million people came last year.
Yeah, exactly.
That's too high.
Exactly. And, you know, the infrastructure's not in place. Going back to your point, Darren, we do have a labour shortage. If it means we can build more houses and we need to import some people who can build them and we don't have the homegrown talent...
more people, then you've got to build more houses on top of that.
I know. It's a circle that goes round and round, you know, and I think if you want to be hard, really hard on immigration, I'm talking legal immigration at the moment. If you want to be really hard on it, you have to realise that certain housing targets are not going to be met. Ditto, you know, trying to get waiting times down, not going to be met, because over the course of the last 20 years, and this is a failure of predominantly the last Conservative government, but also, you know, previous to that, a little bit, we have not trained enough people to fulfil various trades in this country. No one has done it, and we find ourselves in the situation we're in. Just picking up on the trade point very quickly, you know, what's going to come down the track here is if we start having this closer relationship with the EU because we want trade, etc., and geographically it makes sense, there are, you know, it's a collection of our nearest neighbours, that is going to put us on a collision course with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has made it very clear he's not a fan of the EU. And I believe, currently as a sovereign nation, we should have the best of both worlds. That should be one of the benefits of Brexit. You trade with European countries and also you trade with America, because, of course, when we were in the EU, there were limitations on what we could and couldn't do with America. Now we're out of the EU, we should be able to benefit from that.
And the veterinary point, that Scarlett made earlier, actually, I think that shows the quite malicious side of the EU negotiating team, because that's one thing where surely it's not beyond the wit of man for there to be an agreement.
I don't think they like us, Darren. And, you know, we've got to talk about fisheries as well very quickly.
You know, it's terrible.
That's in the papers today as well. I'm a little bit old school. I believe you're an island. You should have the right to decide who comes into your territorial waters and doesn't. End of.
France gets more out of the English Channel than we do, Scarlett. Surely you can't believe that's all right.
France calls it La Manche. I think, to be frank, it's not the English Channel, it is the bit of water that divides us.
Well, I wish it was more French, Scarlett, because then maybe they'd care about the migrants that they're letting just walk over into Britain.
Well, we can go on and on about that, and we can get on about that. But I mean, certainly one of the things that if we get on to that is that yes, they're not interested in returns, but they've never been interested. I mean, why would you go? Oh right, we'll take these people back who don't want to live in our country and they want to live in yours, and nobody wants them. I mean, that's mad. But I do think. I mean, I just think we have to understand that negotiations are negotiations.
OK.
Joined in the studio here in Westminster by Nick Candy, a leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. And Nick Candy, why are you joining a party with just 5 MPs?
Well, Chris, thank you for having me, but I love our country. I think our country is amazing, but our country is in decline. I've got friends across the political spectrum. I've got some very good friends in the Labour Party. I've got some very good friends in the Tory Party, and they will always be my friends. But I genuinely believe it's time for a change in direction, and that change in direction is Reform and Nigel Farage.
This year, you backed the Tories at the start of the conference. This year, I saw you at the popcorn event, then Labour at the election, now Reform UK. What is your political journey? Why are you moving around so much?
Listen, I voted for Tony Blair when he came to the election. I voted for Boris and David Cameron and the guys there. I didn't vote for Labour at this general election. I said Keir Starmer's a good guy with good values, and that it was time for change. After some 13 years of some promises that were made that weren't delivered on, I felt it was time for change. However, the last 4 or 5 months under Labour has been a disaster for them as well. They know it, we know it, the country knows it. And I believe that Reform and Nigel are the future, and I'm going to back them because we have one last chance at this. I've got 2 young daughters here in the country. I would like them to grow up here, but they don't need to grow up here. I have a choice. okay? And when my grandma came here to the UK, and she came from Cyprus many, many years ago, she's not with us anymore, she was a waitress up in Neasden. And I look at what's happening today, and she would have to be on the NHS wait list for 2-3 years. It's just a disaster. The country is in decline.
It's a Tory failure, Labour trying to get it right.
Labour have got it so wrong already. You can't tax your way out of this problem, okay? You have to grow the economy, okay? And I'm not a politician. I don't want to be a politician. But what I can do is I'm very good at raising monies for funds for businesses. I'm very good at helping operations of businesses. And I will make sure that Reform UK has the right funds to run their operations and businesses correctly.
You say you can raise enough funds to make them win the next general election. Nigel Farage, to my right, will become Prime Minister. How much do you think you can raise?
I think for past general elections, sort of 25 to 40 million pounds has been raised for previous parties, and I think I will do significantly better than that.
More than 40 million?
Yes.
Wow. And
already this morning, I've had millions of pounds worth of donations from people that have never donated to a political party in this country. But it's not just about...
That's incredible.
It's not just about getting rich donors and billionaire people, whatever, or millionaire people to donate. We need the guys that have got £1, £5, £10, £25, £25 to be a member of Reform. Reform has 100,000 members now. The Tories have 130,000 members. I'm sure in the next 6 months, Reform will go past the Tory membership. And that will be a game changer in this country. And once they start winning some of these local elections and these by-elections, it's going to be a complete game changer. My only job is to raise them the funds to do it properly.
You'll be the treasurer in the new year of the company that owns Reform or the membership party?
Well, that is something
Nigel Farage.
I'll deal with that. You know, I set the thing up as a company because I didn't want a new nascent political party to be taken over, hijacked by bad forces, and now the party's matured, you know, and it's gone beyond its teenage years in terms of development. So I'm changing it from my shareholding to being a completely different structure where effectively the members will own it. That's with the lawyers. I've got to get the Electoral Commission to agree to the change.
It takes time.
It takes time, but it's happening. I mean, I promised two things. You know, when I was in the town hall in Clacton on that election night, I said two things. I would democratise the party. Well, we set branches up all around the country. They're choosing their candidates. I'm changing the structure. I'm with the lawyers. But I also promised, perhaps even more importantly, from the point of view of most of the public, that I'd professionalise the party. You know, no more shoddy vetting, the right candidates, the right people, the right structure. And I think putting in place people like Zia Yusuf as chairman has shown, you know, I want to get professionals involved. And today is a very, very big further step.
It's a big moment.
Yeah,
I mean, this guy raises, he knows rich people. He raises, until now it's been on you, really, isn't it, fundraising?
Yeah, completely. No, completely.
You're sort of got the professional in maybe to do it.
There's no pressure on him. He's doing it because he wants. But you heard him earlier. Yeah. You know, he's got 2 young daughters. He's worried about the future of this country. I bet you watching live now, there are people of all ages really scared that we're in societal decline, that we're led by people who seem to accept this sort of gentle downward spiral. We're much more optimistic than that. We genuinely believe we can turn this around. And it's why, and you come to a Reform members event, I mean, they're like rock concerts because people are optimistic. These are the people that will give us a better future.
They're far removed, though, from, if I may say so, the wealth of your new treasurer.
So what?
Yeah, maybe so what?
Do you know what? Whether somebody has nothing or a lot of money, they're all human beings with the same feelings, the same emotions, the same concerns for their kids and grandkids.
And also, I started with £6,000 in 1995 with my brother. My grandma lent us that money. That's what she could afford. So for all the people out there that are upset with the state of the country and where it's going, and you've got to have hope. And if you don't have hope, yes, then you've got nothing, yes? Okay, and you have to have aspirational to do better. And I believe that Nigel is the right guy to do that for this country. I've seen it firsthand. He started as a dear friend, a close friend, and he's still a dear friend, okay? My kids call him Uncle Nigel, okay? And, like, you know, but I've got other friends in the Labour Party and the Tories, yes? And those relationships will stay, you know.
Have you told the Tories, like Kemi Badenoch, that you're...
Not Kemi, but I spoke with, you know, I resigned my membership last night, okay? And I've spoken to Boris and other people. And
what do they say to you when they say that you're back in Nigel Farage?
So listen, I think they will be upset that I've gone to Reform, but at the end of the day, we're friends, yes. And friendship, we can have different views on religion, business, politics. Doesn't mean I'm not your friend. Yes, we can respect each other's values and morals. Okay, that's what it's about.
Just on the nuts and bolts, you're going to give a £7 million figure. Has that happened already?
No, it hasn't.
Seven figures.
That's millions of pounds to laymen.
Yeah, so I will give us. I've committed to reform and to Nigel. I will give a 7-figure check. But also
that one donation will transform your party. I mean, your biggest donation so far is 250,000 from Zia Yusuf, right?
In this incarnation, that's true. Yes, that is true.
I mean, that's the first.
And by the way, Chris, this morning, already on my phone, we have millions of pounds of donations from friends.
What made, or pledges or donations?
Pledges that they said, listen, I will give you 250,000, I'll give you 500,000, I'll give you £1 million. Can you come and see me? Can Nigel come and see me? Can we speak? Yes. But we're not just after these huge donations. We need the person. I was the guy on the street, yes, that could only wanted to become a member of a party and pay the £25 membership donation. Okay, we need all of that. So we're going to have. We're not just going for these large checks. We want to make sure from ground up we've got huge donations. Yeah. And Gen Z love Nigel and the amount of money that he has the ability to raise from them, and the way he
relates. TikTok generation.
He relates.
Very much so.
They relate to him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and this, of course, is again part of the big revolutionary change in British politics that I think is happening before our very eyes. It is a very engaged 16 to 24-year-old.
Can you turn it into power MPs? You know how hard it is to break through with the system weighted against you.
You know, I've been at this game over 30 years. And I've had some good days and I've had some bad days, of course, inevitably. I think we're at a moment, potentially historic moment in British politics. And you know something? If we don't succeed, I just fear we're going to see our country continuing to go down the drain with many of our brightest and best young people leaving Britain.
While I've got you, there's rumours Suella Braverman may be your big signing for the MP base in Parliament.
You tell me.
I'm asking you. You're the boss of the party.
Well, you're the one who does all the gossip. You know.
Her partner's come across.
Her husband joined at the weekend and within 24 hours was out leafleting and knocking on doors. Incredible. And he texted me and said, at last, something I can believe in again. As for what Suella's going to do, I don't know.
Are you talking to her?
No, I haven't done, actually. I haven't spoken to her since the election.
But other Tory MPs might come across?
I don't know.
Last question for you. Elon Musk.
Yeah.
The money man is here. He knows how to talk to rich people. Will Musk donate? Do you want him to donate?
I don't know. I'm the fact that already today I'm going to say retweeted because re-X doesn't really work, but he's retweeted already a post about Nick becoming the party treasurer, and he said interesting. And I know Nick's got connections with him as well. Look, the fact that he's supportive of us, we're delighted with. If he wants to give us money, and it's legal money, we'd be thrilled.
Nick, just finally to you. You know Elon Musk. You might come across and give us some money.
I've never ever met him personally, but I have a very dear friend that is close with him. And actually, when Boris wanted to speak to Elon about 2 months ago, Boris's wife messaged me and said, do you think you could put him in contact with Elon? And I did that via my friend. Okay? So there will be a chance to speak with Elon, and if he wants to donate, of course, we'd love him to donate. If it can be done properly and legally and through the right mechanisms, then absolutely fine. Yes, but it's not all about just one guy. It's not all about Nick Candy. Yes, this is about changing this country for the better. And my only job here is I'm not a politician. I don't want to be a politician. I helped raise funds for the Tory party. I'm now helping Reform doing it. I think we will break records of that, not because I'm so great at doing it. I believe people want that change.
And just finally, do you really think this man here, Nigel Farage, can be Prime Minister in 2029? That's what you're saying here with your pledge.
I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think Reform UK will be the party in government in 2029 and Nigel Farage will be the Prime Minister of this country.
Well, Nick Candy and Nigel Farage, you've got lunch to go to. Thank you for joining us here on GB News.
Let's speak directions then, shall we? Because the billionaire Nick Candy, you'll all be familiar with him. He, of course, was a big advocate for the Tory party, a big donor to the Tory party as well. Well, he is now defected to the Reform UK party. Let's just take a listen to him speaking to Nigel Farage earlier today.
My only job here is I'm not a politician. I don't want to be a politician. I helped raise funds for the Tory party. I'm now helping Reform doing it. I think we will break records of that, not because I'm so great at doing it. I believe people want that change. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think Reform UK will be the party in government in 2029 and Nigel Farage will be the Prime Minister of this country.
Oh, interesting stuff. Nigel Farage as well. He was busy tweeting. I'll show you his tweets now. So he was basically saying that they're building the political future, essentially, on Twitter today. Elon Musk, he then got involved, asking when is the next political opportunity, essentially. Nigel Farage wrote back to Elon Musk saying, essentially, in May this year, when you've got those local council elections. Nick Candy as well, he said that he's been speaking to Elon Musk this morning, as it happens. I mean, are you gutted that you've lost this donor and advocate for your party, Jacqueline?
Yes, I am. I am gutted when we lose any donor and any supporter or somebody crosses the floor, but I'm not surprised because clearly we've gone through some huge turmoil and we're having to now rebuild our own party following the election. I do understand that Nick actually supported the Labour Party for the election that's just gone, which is obviously his choice, and now he's moved to Reform. We also have the question, don't we, about, billionaires funding parties as well.
What's your position on that? Are you thinking
I have no issue. I welcome any billionaire or millionaire that would like to donate. Clearly, there are very strict rules how you can donate in the United Kingdom, and you do have to be, it has to come from the United Kingdom. We can't have foreign money coming through, and that's whether it's members or whether it's donors who inevitably become members. What we don't have, both the Conservatives and Reform, is we don't have a pot like the Labour Party, who normally achieve around 23 to 25 million a year from the trade unions. And that's where they've always had a good chunk of funding, which is absolutely fine. And then they will raise, from business or members. So,
but momentum's going away from you. Or that's what it feels like at the moment, doesn't it?
I think it's early days yet. As we said, we've won about... we've had some by-elections, council by-elections, in the last 2 or 3 months, and we have won about 20 seats back. So May is going to be very interesting because you've got some of the big county councils that are going to be up for election as well. And... So, people do have a choice, and what they need to remember is that it's one thing to campaign and be a great campaigner. And I was in the European Parliament with Nigel for all of those years. It's a very different thing to be in government. I mean, to be in government, you need at least about 110 members of Parliament because they are the government positions. So you've got to, and you've got to then you've got to get a majority to win. And equally, you've got to really get a good base in the council elections. So we have to start rebuilding, getting our councillors back, and then building the base.
So you're still optimistic about the Tories' future?
I am, yeah.
Using the internet without a VPN is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. We want to help protect you. This video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the VPN to help keep you safe. Now, you might be asking, what is a VPN? Well, a virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network, such as at airports, coffee shops, friends' houses, or even in your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. Hackers that are connected to the same Wi-Fi network have the ability to steal your personal data with ease. T-Mobile reached a settlement this year with the US Federal Communications Commission after they suffered data breaches in 2021, 22, and 23. In 2023 alone, over 37 million customers' data was exposed. And it's not just hackers to be concerned about. Information can be censored. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news content that you love. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one Private Internet Access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. Plus, we've got a huge GB News discount. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get 83% off PIA. That is under £2 a month, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free. There's also a
former Tory Prime Minister Winston Churchill. I think this is not the end of the beginning. This is really the beginning of the end for the Conservative Party, because talk about, Michelle, revenge is a dish best served cold. You've got to look at this in terms of this psychodrama between Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, the upper echelons of the Reform Party as it is now, and indeed, the people that have joined or defected in recent months. This goes all the way back to the 2019 general election, when Nigel stood down in 317 constituencies, frankly, to deliver Boris Johnson's whacking majority. And the Tories gave Nigel absolutely nothing in return for that. In fact, they sort of danced on his grave. And
not all of them.
And what he's managed to do since, following that election, and obviously following the Conservatives' massive defeat in their history just a few months ago, is he's regrouped, obviously, with a club of billionaires. And I agree with you, Jack, we don't want state funding of political parties. No. I think anyone who's eligible, whether it's at the individual trade union level, or indeed if you're a registered business, you're a bona fide business. All these donations, by the way, are registered on the Electoral Commission. You can go and see them online. So as long as there's transparency, I don't frankly care where the money's come from, as long as it's legal and it is registered. But I think at a minimum, Labour suffered from this in the 1980s with the defection of the STP and then the divide on the left. This is an existential crisis.
Conservative Party that I'd seen under even David Cameron. You know, the rot started there, I think.
Yeah, I think, well, it's been going for a long time, but I think lots of sort of things sort of crystallised in my mind why I made the move, but partly it was Donald Trump's success, because in a way he's shown what the Conservative Party could have been.
Yes.
You know, he's built this very successful Republican Party that appeals to working class, blue collar Americans who want immigration under control, who are unhappy about what their kids are being taught in schools.
Who want to be able to have enough money to have a decent standard of living.
Yeah, and what the Tories did after the Brexit vote is they could have controlled immigration, they could have kept taxes down, they could have fought, you know, the culture wars in a way that the average person wanted, but instead, you know, that we had net zero, we lost control of immigration, and we put up things like national insurance. So I'm afraid the Tories went in the wrong direction. And
the Tories gave us the highest taxes since the Second World War, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I feel sad to be leaving the Conservative Party, because political parties aren't just sort of political allegiances. In a way, they're friends and almost family.
Well, I mean, you started Conservative Home, which is still considered to be one of the more, what you might call, I suppose, pointed reference points for the Conservatives to go to. I mean, I don't think you're involved in it anymore.
No.
Because it's...
Certainly not anymore.
No, because I'm not quite sure how Conservative Home is, but then you've also worked inside of Downing Street, been an advisor, you know, you've been in with the furniture, if you like, of the Conservative Party. I mean, did you get any reaction from them? Did anybody from the Tories call you and say, what are you doing?
Yeah, I had enormous... My phone basically melted yesterday, and I'm going to do a little video later on trying to explain in sort of more detail why I've made the decision that I have, but I think Nigel Farage is a very special politician. I don't agree with him on
He's a great communicator.
He's a great communicator. And, you know, he understood a long time before the Conservative Party did that people had had enough of the European Union and led that campaign. He's been fighting on the immigration issue for a great number of years. And last Thursday's immigration numbers, Mike, the scale of immigration that's happened to this country, no one's given consent for it.
No.
In fact, an election after election, the British people have voted against.
And people have been told, promises have been made. I mean, the Boris Johnson government, before they came in, were promising to bring immigration down, net immigration, to 20,000.
Yeah.
And it was nothing near even 10 times that.
And they had the, you know, they can't control necessarily, you know, the people crossing the channel in illegal boats.
Well, they could try a bit harder than
they could try harder. But what they absolutely can control is the general levels of illegal migration into this country. And they didn't control that.
Well, in fact, they encouraged more people to come. And nowadays you hear people going, oh, well, you know, the trouble is now we've got problems in our higher education system because foreign criminals, Freudian slip, foreign students are not coming in such large numbers. Why? Because they're not allowed to bring any dependents. Well, who said they should have brought dependents with them in the first place? You know, I went to live in America and I was 23. I went on my own. I didn't say, I'm going to take my brother, my sister, his nephew, you know, my grandmother, you know. I went to America to seek my fortune, you know, and also to get away from my family, you know, to be honest. But seriously, I mean...
It's those games at Christmas, playing those board games where they cheated against you in Monopoly.
It's true. I mean, the point is that, you know, we've handed over the power to what we have kind of always said we wouldn't do, which is that anybody who wants to come to this country can bring whoever they want with them, and they can all live happily ever after. Well, we can't, actually.
No, we're seen as a soft-touch nation. And I, unfortunately, decided, particularly after last Thursday's numbers came out on immigration, the Conservative Party just weren't serious enough about addressing that
And so
problem.
are we going to see you lining up as an MP for reform at some point?
No, one way I'm a bit like you, Mike, is I'm an irritant, a rebel, an annoyance. You know, I couldn't ever sign up to someone else's policy platform.
Okay.
I think it's in our blood, isn't it? We think for ourselves.
Yeah,
and
totally.
look, I'm now a Reform Party member. I handed over my £25 in cash to Nigel Farage.
Yes, I saw you on Kevin's show saying that.
Yesterday.
Right.
And
did he give you a receipt?
No. I need to go get that.
Yes, you should. But that's
but you know, I said to Nigel, you know, I won't always agree with everything Reform says, but he said, you know, they're a rebel army, And I took a part of that.
Well, I mean, they're
rebellion
making
now.
far more noise and they're making far more difference, I would say, to Parliament than 5 people should.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad that they're there, and I'm very glad that they're doing it.
Yeah,
You know,
well-
because they are the voice of the people, actually. And when I was talking to, funnily enough, we're going to get a clip in a minute from Mel Stride talking to Rachel Reeves. You know, I had Mel Stride on yesterday, and when I mentioned Donald Trump's name, you could see him sort of visibly, slightly, you know, recoil, as if, you know, oh, I don't want to be saying anything that's popular about Donald Trump. Well, why not?
Yeah.
You know, they're still frightened of going anywhere near that.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump is probably the most successful politician in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, he speaks for people in a way few other politicians do. And, you know, like Nigel Farage, he's not always comfortable listening to some things that he says. He says controversial things. You think, oh, is that right? But what people know when they hear Trump and they hear Nigel is they think, well, I don't always agree with them, but they're telling me the truth.
Yeah.
They're not giving me a line. It's not manufactured by someone else or an advisor. I'm hearing the truth from them as they see it.
Yes.
And people want that. They're fed up with being lied to by politicians.
Well, I mean, look at all the lies that Labour have told. I mean, we've been told one thing after another that they were going to do. They've now, I'm about to talk to Ryan Sabey from The Sun, but I said this yesterday, you know, Keir Starmer has now worked out what we've all known for a while, the government's not working. So he's going to have to reshoot it starting tomorrow. He's going to come out and make another speech, making some more pledges or missions or whatever they are. Most of them won't happen. Most of them won't come true. And many of them he doesn't even believe in.
Do you think he'll do a countdown to his
I hope so. I hope so. I'm looking forward to that. Let's bring Ryan Sabey into the conversation. Ryan, very good morning to you. Welcome. It looks as though the Starmer...
The UK is in recession, but the real story is the past 14 years of stagnant wage growth. 0% growth in real wages is unprecedented in the post-war period. This flatlining of economic growth is leading to higher taxes and fewer public services. It's an unwelcome combination of low growth, low investment and increasing pessimism. This video will look at 7 areas of real economic weakness, why the UK is underperforming, and whether there are any grounds to be slightly more optimistic in the future. The UK Treasury is keen to point out that UK real GDP growth is not too bad compared to other countries. But this statistic is misleading because most of the growth in GDP has come from a rise in the population. In the past 2 decades, propelled by net migration, the UK population has grown from 59 to 67 million. And if we look at real GDP per capita, UK living standards have fallen in recent years. If we had maintained our past trend rate of economic growth, we would be an extra £8,000 a year better off per person. This explains why real wage growth has been so minimal in recent years, and it's been quite a shock to the system, because the increasing living standards we got used to in the post-war period is now increasingly under threat. Will our children actually be better off than their parents? In recent months, we have started to see a small increase in real wages, but it is really very weak given all the past falls, and it will struggle to make much difference to living standards. The good news about the UK economic situation is that unemployment remains low. In the 1980s, unemployment averaged 10%, and in the 1990s, 8%. Today the figure is less than 4%. It is a very strange recession to have such a low unemployment rate, but there are 2 caveats. Firstly, there's been a significant growth in temporary, zero-hour type contract work, leading to more labour market uncertainty and underemployment. Secondly, and perhaps more concerningly, there's been quite high levels of economic inactivity, not classified as unemployed, but not working either. Long-term sickness has risen to a record 2.8 million. Nevertheless, despite a technical recession, firms still face labour shortages in certain areas, and this has been a big factor behind the pressure to attract to fill our labour vacancies, especially in certain sectors such as the care workers, NHS staff, fruit pickers and vocational workers like bricklayers and plumbers. The UK does score quite well on university education, but the lack of skilled vocational workers is becoming a constraint to economic growth. Also, when looking at an economy, it's important to look beyond headline statistics. Average wage growth is stagnant, but different groups of workers have fared very differently. During the inflation spike, higher food and energy prices hit low-income families more who face a relatively higher inflation rate. At the same time, a benefit freeze, especially on housing benefit and universal credit, has hit low-income households. It's the poorest who are likely to see the biggest squeeze in living standards in coming months and years. And after housing costs taken into account, there's been a worrying rise in child poverty levels. There's been an unequal effect of a cost of living crisis, edging UK inequality upwards after several years of improvement. Now, whilst the UK has struggled to grow income, the past decade has seen more impressive growth in wealth. The ratio of wealth to income has increased. Now, this was partly driven by the period of very low interest rates and quantitative easing, which contributed to house price to income ratios soaring. And this created winners and losers. Homeowners who bought more than 15 years ago are sitting on quite significant equity gains. But a new generation of households face an unpalatable choice between high rents and very difficult to get a mortgage. Unsurprisingly, the ratio of young people becoming a homeowner has plummeted in the UK, and there's a big divide between those whose parents own a house and those who don't. The housing crisis has effectively worsened living standards more than real wage figures suggest, and the UK is one of the worst housing markets for low-income groups who pay a high share of their income on rent. The problem is that there seems to be little solution to the housing crisis. Higher interest rates and inflation combined with weak demand has seen building rates fall in 2023. The government have a target of 300,000, which they have never really met, but 2023 is likely to see the target appear even further away. One study suggests a shortfall of 4 million homes in the UK, but building homes where they are needed is going to be a monumental challenge, especially with a population forecast to rise to 76 million in the next 20 years. Now, whilst the UK has experienced many global headwinds, such as COVID, oil price shock, the economy is also struggling with the effects of a Brexit deal, which has been very disruptive to European trade. Historically, the UK was one of the most open economies, with trade a major source of economic growth. But since Brexit, firms have faced higher tariffs, more regulations and custom barriers. In 2024, new regulations are still coming into force, which are particularly damaging for the food industry. Analysis by both the OBR and UK in a Changing Europe estimate the net cost of Brexit to be around 4 to 5% of GDP, compared to if the UK had stayed in the single market. Now, this cost is spread out over many years, reducing economic growth rates by an average of around 0.3% over the next 15 years. But the net loss is an estimated £2,500 per person, with a corresponding fall in tax revenues. And so far, free trade deals with the US have not materialised, and even the Canadian one is under review to issues over agriculture. The uncertainty surrounding Brexit led to a big drop-off in private sector business investment since 2016. And this is a problem because the UK has consistently had low levels of investment. Whilst private sector investment is weak, it's not helped by the fact that public investment has also been quite weak, with government cutting back on public investment to meet debt rules. Now, another issue is that when examining an economy, it's not just about GDP per capita and individual wages. There's a private wealth, a public wealth. Living standards are determined by the state of public resources. For example, the NHS has faced a sharp rise in waiting lists. Total waiting lists in England have risen from 2.5 million in 2010 to a near all-time high of 7.6 million. The NHS is actually one government department which has seen significant rises in real inflation-adjusted spending. But despite this, it's struggled to keep up with an ageing population, increasing long-term sickness. And it's not just about money. Productivity growth in the public sector has been near zero in the past decade, which is a real problem for improving living standards with limited money available. Now, other departments have not been protected, and they've seen real cuts in spending. Education, the legal system, local councils and the environment have all really struggled with the stringent spending cuts and services have suffered as a result. So in this area, the outlook is quite concerning. The government have recently reluctantly increased tax rates to one of the highest shares of GDP for many decades. And there is a likelihood that taxes may be cut in March. But if that does happen, it will definitely be at the expense of lower government spending on other departments elsewhere. The head of the OBR has recently criticised the government because their spending forecasts are based on arbitrary figures with no detail on how the cuts will be achieved. Since reaching a post-war low of 33% of GDP in 2000, UK public sector debt rose sharply in the financial crisis and has continued to grow due to COVID, low economic growth and an ageing population. The rise in debt is particularly concerning, given that it happened despite austerity and quite stringent spending limits. With this very low growth that we're seeing, the government faces a very unwelcome and unpopular trade-off of having less money to fund higher demand for public services. Now, debt is forecast to rise slowly over the next 4 years, with the hope it may fall in the 5th year. But this forecast is based on quite, you could say, optimistic forecasts for cutting or holding back government spending. Now, if all that sounds tremendously depressing, there's at least one piece of good news in the UK economy, and that's in the past 6 months, inflation has fallen back quite sharply. It's been helped by falling gas prices and is forecast to fall back to the Bank of England inflation target later in the year. But of course, we still face a much higher price level than before the inflation crisis. Now, the Bank of England has received considerable criticism over its role in recent months. Even an ex-member of a bank, Andrew Haldane, admitted that quantitative easing went on too long and monetary policy was too loose at the end of COVID. But the UK inflation experience was not that much dissimilar to the rest of the world and Europe in particular, though the overall increase in prices was slightly higher in the UK than the rest of Europe. Now, another concern is that the bank are perhaps now overcompensating for their past inflation failures by maintaining relatively high interest rates, given the economy is going into recession and inflation is falling. I think there's a desire to regain their inflation credibility, but it's having a big cost, especially for those with mortgages and borrowing. But I think that overall, the impact of monetary policy in the past 2 years is at best relatively minor in explaining the long-term economic performance of the UK economy. The long-term decline in the fortunes of the UK economy can be shown by a steady depreciation in the exchange rate. The pound has fallen against both the euro and the dollar. In fact, the United States provides an interesting counterpoint to the UK and European economies. Helped by substantial fiscal expansion, the US has left Europe and the UK behind. But it is more than just deficit spending. The industrial policy of Biden did create very strong private sector investment, which is not really occurring in the UK. And one of the UK's real concerns is that its long-term fall in productivity growth, which really fell off a cliff after the great financial crisis. Unless this can be improved, then economic growth and better living standards will remain elusive. But the problem is, to increase productivity requires many things to fall into place. Better technology, better management, better adoption of new technology, so many factors. Now, overall, the UK's problems are not unredeemable. We are still a wealthy country, even if it is increasingly concentrated in certain cities and a smaller group of people. And by the way, that is a big problem. Another problem of the UK economy is a substantial regional inequality, with wealth generation focused in London and the South East. Still, overall, UK GDP per capita is 23rd in the world. But if we were grading the UK economy in the past few decades, it would probably be given a failing grade, at least could do a lot better. Now, the IMF predict the UK may grow reasonably well in the next few years, which would start to lift some of the gloom and give the government a slightly better trade-off. In theory, the UK should have lots of spare capacity and the ability to catch up lost ground, and this could enable higher growth. But a more pessimistic scenario is that we've lost the capacity to grow like we used to, and we may increasingly resemble the likes of Italy, which has seen pretty stagnant real wages since 2000. Now, one topic I didn't go into much detail was government debt, because I covered it in much more detail in a recent video. It's not particularly cheery. In a way, debt is worse than it appears. But also, I did try to explain why some fears over debt may be somewhat exaggerated. So it's not quite the end of the world just yet. Anyway, I hope you like this video. Please subscribe, and there'll be lots more great content coming. And let's hope for some nice positive news to talk about sometime in the future.
Just a short one, as I know it's the weekend, but a huge dose of reality for this government to swallow that its plans are not working. With a side helping of I Told You So, and I wear the sweater for the occasion. It's Christmas after all. The Telegraph reports that Surrey has run out of places for private school children that are having to make the move into state school because their parents can't afford the VAT. Shock horror to some of those that leave nasty snark comments. Some people cannot afford the VAT because it's £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 a year extra and more in some places. And despite the government's own statistics saying that 2,400 children will need to move, they've run out of places. Now, I'll come back to that in just a second. Now, there is a petition calling on the government to reverse this decision, to bring it in on the 1st of January in the middle of a year, which is making children have to move in the middle of GCSE years, which is really important in just a second. This petition has now reached more than 100,000 signatures, so it will go to the committee to consider for a debate, and then we'll hear much of the same stupid excuses that don't really answer any of the questions. But the statistics are unchanged. Surrey reports, as I read from this post here, Surrey and Woking have no places available forecast for 2025 to 26 for year 9, 10 and 11. And in Woking, there are no places in year 7 either. So despite, as I said, the government's own statistics showing that 2,400 children will need to move, they have no places. So what are they to do? The only real alternative, because the local authority does have a duty to provide for those children, the only real alternative is for the local authority to consider is paying for a place in those private schools, because they have to be educated. The law, after all, says children must be educated under those mandatory years of school education. Remembering, of course, that local authorities prosecute parents for taking children out of school to go on holiday. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. There's arguments on both sides, but nonetheless, local authorities prosecute parents if they are known to be taking children out of school to go on holiday instead of going to school. But I'd be very interested to see what happens here, because there are literally thousands of children, and that is just one local authority that's reported. If you remember from my previous video, lots of areas are just not giving out those numbers and statistics, because then it will be quite obvious that this is a serious problem across the country that they cannot ignore. And of course, it is a serious problem across the country that they cannot ignore. Not only that, in more fantastic news, he says tongue-in-cheek, I also read that lots of companies, a record number of employers, are scrapping the business Christmas bonuses this year, and even some of them scrapping Christmas parties and things like that because the companies cannot afford it. All again thanks to the budget. And that's not all. Somebody yesterday commented on the number of people in small boats crossing. Now, you remember my video yesterday. If you didn't see it, go catch it up from yesterday. 9 boats arrived with 609 people aboard. Somebody did raise an interesting comment as to how on earth would that equate between 9 boats to have 609 people arrive. So I thought, great question. Let's take a look. So I took this here, and you can see by the red dots, these are, one dot is ahead. Now, I'm not entirely certain that I got every person aboard this dinghy boat thing, but I think I got most of them. So let's go through this exercise and count them together, shall we? So if we go for the bottom line first, and I'll try and draw a line through them so that we know we've got them. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. It's like playing a game. 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 7, 8, 9, 61. 61, and I'll put that up here so you can see it. 61, and I'm not certain that I got them all, because there's little dark patches in here. There may be some people lying among the things. Yeah, I can't quite see that. So assuming that every boat is roughly the same. Some may have many more, some may be bigger boats and so on. But this is a lot of people to be crammed on a boat. If you've ever had the fortune of being on a boat anywhere for some form of recreation, you'll know that a few people on it gets a bit crowded fairly quickly. 61 people on a boat, that is obviously unsafe. And now, in the interests of all the people aboard, I would suggest that we have to do something about this for their own safety while they are making the dangerous journey of crossing the channel. So that is a brief update. Do let me know in the comments what you think. All of this cannot continue. This is utter madness. They cannot hide from it. But of course they do. They obfuscate and they give non-answer responses to all of these questions. I'll be very interested in the debate, if there is one, about the school fees coming in January, which is a ridiculous time to bring it in. I mean, if you have to bring it in, at least you could bring it in at the start of a new academic year, not in the middle of GCSEs. As you saw from those numbers, years 9, 10 and 11, there are no places available. So thousands of children are being ejected really from their school in the middle of their GCSEs because their parents can't afford the fees. I would challenge anybody to just reach and grab several £1,000 extra like it doesn't mean anything to you for the next 2 or 3 years at the very least while your children are still at that school. So I know lots of people, because I know thousands of you have written comments and said how much you or someone close to you struggle, scrimp, save, work 2, 3 jobs to ensure that your children can go to these private schools to give them the best possible opportunity. And many of them are absolutely distraught, not to mention the children being distraught because they just lose their place at the school because they cannot afford the fees. So what are you going to do about it, government? This is something that absolutely needs attention. But here we are. This is what we've got. So thank you for watching. Please do like and comment. Do subscribe to my channel. That helps me grow. And as always, thank you for watching.